Support for Veterans Corner Radio is made possible by M&M Printing and the Observer News of Ruskin, Florida.
Hello and welcome to Veterans Corner Radio Podcasts, information for and about veterans. On this podcast, host Joe Mulberger has a conversation with Jake Rademacher, founder of Perseverance Productions. Jake is the director of two films about the war in Iraq, Brothers at War and Brothers After War. Jake has taken the films on the road to both military unique audiences as well as to the public. Now, Jake holds seminars using the film Brothers After War as the centerpiece. These have been life-saving seminars with critical value for veterans, their families, and their friends. They'll tell you how you can find out where the seminars are taking place near you. Here now is Joe Mulberger with Veterans Corner Radio on Veterans Corner Radio Podcasts.
Welcome to Veterans Corner Radio, a show dedicated to providing information to all those who have served our country's military and to their families. Now, here is your host, combat veteran and educator, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Joe Mulberger.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's show. You're listening to Veterans Corner Radio, and I'm your host, Joe Mulberger. Today we have an unbelievable nationwide organization to present called Perseverance Productions. And we're talking today with the inspiration behind that organization and the director of two phenomenal military-associated films. The first one is called Brothers at War, and the second is called Brothers After War. We welcome you, Jake Rademacher, to the show today. Jake, tell us a little bit about this organization of yours, Perseverance Productions, and how'd you get it started?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I got it started because my brothers came home from Iraq. Isaac was an operations officer, civil affairs. He was an infantry officer, but doing civil affairs for the 82nd Airborne. And Joe was on a two-man sniper team at the age of 18 in Fallujah alongside him. And they came home from Iraq, and they told me the truth was not making it home from Iraq. And so as the brother, that really pissed me off. So I decided to do something about it. I got this idea to maybe join Isaac in Iraq and to tell his story over there, and Joe as well. And so at first I just started with whatever I had in my back pocket and whatever I could max my credit card out to do. It's expensive to make movies, but I went for it and filmed Isaac leaving on his third deployment, interviewed both he and Joe, their spouses, and then just kept going, interviewed the rest of my family, interviewed Isaac when he came back from the middle of that deployment. And also at the same time pursued permission from the military. And the military really liked my idea. But they said, you've got to get distribution or a producer with a history of getting things distributed, hopefully award-winning, proof of financing, and then at least 30 days to process security clearances. So I tried to get distribution, but not many people in Hollywood wanted to send a first-time filmmaker into a war zone in 2005. So that went up to the top, but got a no. At a couple networks. But I found one producer by the name of Norman Powell who, really seasoned producer, 40 years my senior, 3 Emmy nominations, incredible guy. And he agreed to be my producing partner. But then I had to raise enough money to get into a war zone and bring a crew over there and all of that. So I went back to my hometown of Decatur, Illinois, and I raised, between there and California, I raised about $300,000 in about a month. And I never sold anything in my life before that. And then once I had all that money together and I had the producer on board, I went back to the Army and eventually they said yes. So in August of 2005, I found myself on an airplane with a couple of cameramen, and I was like the third cameraman, and went to, first Baghdad and then off to Mosul, Iraq, landed in Mosul, Iraq, and eventually, got across town, which was an interesting experience, and then reconnected with my brother, Isaac, in Iraq in 2005. And everything just kind of fell into place after that. I started filming first his unit. I got to film inside of a skiff, which I know is a rare treat. I still don't know how I pulled that off, but it happened. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And then eventually I got out to the Syrian border with long-range surveillance scouts, which was amazing. And, doing that unit first really paved the way because I knew about some missions that were going to happen before they happened. And I followed the agreement regarding operational security. So I came back to Iraq a second time and embedded in 3 units. No one else wanted this embed because I guess more IDs went off between Ramadi and Fallujah there in 05 and 06 than anywhere else in Iraq. And I said, well, send me there because they deserve to have their story told too. And it was an incredible, amazing experience. By the first night I was there, I was out on a cordon search with a captain from the, Michigan National Guard. They had the elections the next day. I got to go out with the Iraqi unit the next day, be closer to the polling sites. And then it just kept going. I mean, a couple weeks in, the snipers were asking me when I was going to go out with them. And then I got a chance to go out with the Marine advisors and the Iraqi army. And, as I was there longer and longer, eventually started to get into a little bit of combat and document our service members, experiencing that and facing that and dealing with that. And, all that became brothers at war. And, it was an incredible experience. I interviewed about 43 combat veterans in Iraq, in addition to my brothers and my mom, dad, sister-in-laws. And, then took a few months to put all that together and eventually finished the film. And then Gary Sinise saw it in the day before Thanksgiving 2007, and he fell in love with the film. He told me it was a really important movie. And then anybody that is listening that knows Gary will probably laugh at this. He started telling me what to do all the time. So we decided to make it official. We asked him to be executive producer of the film, and he said he'd be honored. He felt like it really told the story of and did what he'd been trying to tell the American people about who we have serving. And you think back at that time, the people that were serving in the military and what their families were going through was just extraordinary. If you were in there for a few years, you weren't going once. You oftentimes go on a second deployment. You come back, you experience that combat, and you're changed. It's tough to reintegrate with your family. You're a little bit different. They don't know necessarily what to do either. And so he felt like the film really did a beautiful job of sort of telling the story of all military families serving during that time. And eventually we were able to get it in movie theaters, and the rest is history.
What are you doing with these films now?
Well, an ironic thing happened when I had this kind of crazy idea. I guess a lot of my ideas are crazy, but there's some merit to them, so people get behind them. I told Gary, I said, look, and I think your listeners will relate to this. Sometimes the veterans get ticked off because people don't do their homework, and they do a story about the military and it's not accurate. Now, you can imagine with 2 brothers who've now deployed about 16 times between the 2 of them, my sister's in the Army band up in Fort Drum, my nephew's in the military, my grandfather served in World War II. Like, I'm from a military family, so I knew this going in. So I really worked my butt off to do my best job of being accurate and go to the tough places and get the story and do the interviews and ask the hard questions. So I said, look, I'd rather have the veterans, people serving in this war, be the first ones to tell the rest of America what they think of it. So instead of opening in New York and LA, which you normally do with a documentary, we did something non-traditional. We opened in Columbus, Georgia, next to Fort Benning, Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Jacksonville, North Carolina. And Gary Sinise agreed with me and went with me. So they rolled out the red carpet. We opened the film in these theaters. We sold out, 3 theaters in Fayetteville and 2 theaters in Columbus, Georgia. It was a fantastic evening. But what happened next changed the course of my career in life. Military couples came up to Gary and I after seeing the film together, and they said, we just had our first real conversation about his or her experience after seeing the film together. And I thought, man, that is really important. And now, Joe, I didn't expect that. I made the film to bring the truth back from Iraq to the American people. That's what my brothers told me the problem was. And the film did that. People called it eye-opening, and they were like, they learned a lot. But what I didn't expect was that people that had experienced the war would find that it would lubricate the engine of conversation so well, and that it would actually make it much easier to talk about their experiences, or they would relate to some part of the movie and say, yeah, what he's doing there, or those strikers, or that scouting mission, or getting shot at, or whatever it was, they could more easily tell their story to a loved one. And then that does a lot for the loved one, right? Because sometimes they can get pushed to the side a little bit. You see some of that in the movie. That's happening to me a little bit. I just kind of oddly go to Iraq to try to overcome that stiff arm. But, so it created all this conversation. I thought that's really important. So I got inspired. I created a journal, a companion workbook to go with the film. I showed it to Gary, and, he's a guy with a lot of ideas. So next thing I know, I'm on a 5-base military tour. He's like, let's get it out there, see what they think. So there I am in, Fort Carson. I'm Fort Hood, and I'm at, Fort Bragg, and I'm the Big Red One was the first unit I worked with. We had about 900 guys back 30 days and 60 days from Iraq. And, they assigned the division command sergeant major and the psychiatrist who deployed with them to work with me. I picked 3 questions and we did it. And what part of the film do you relate to and why? And what's the impact been on your family? What inappropriate questions you've been asked? Why do you not like it? And it just incredible. Like these tough soldiers who maybe are a little more reserved would hold some of that in. They were communicating, they were journaling, they were participating, and it sort of blew their minds. And so we then, at Fort Carson, the DOD sent a team out, and 94% of the people would recommend it to their military families. Now think about that. You can get 94% of people to agree if ice cream is good or not. And I would say that military audiences are the toughest audience, and 94% are saying, I'd recommend this to another military family. So I knew we were onto something. And then the Oklahoma National Guard called me and they said, would you come be a speaker? And I'm like, well, I could be a speaker, but I think the thing I'm doing might be more interesting. Instead of me talking, I get your guys to talk. And they agreed. And so they helped me expand the program to like a 6-hour program. It became 7 questions. We created a workbook specifically for spouses. They had lost 14 people overseas in combat. So the second part, I made 12 short films, but we used 3 or 4 of them in the afternoon. One of them was a memorial service that I'd filmed in Iraq to help them kind of make sense of the loss of their loved ones overseas. And, imagine Oklahoma. I mean, that's not exactly, you think of an Oklahoma guy, you think of a tough cowboy. You don't think of somebody maybe opening up about their feelings or whatever. And I remember doing the very first workshop and the battalion commander's like, we're not doing this. And thank God the other battalion commander is like, yes, we are. The workbooks are here. Jake's here. We're doing it. But afterwards, you could tell me what you want to do differently. So it finishes. Now, they didn't tell me any of this, thank God, because I was in front of 1,000 people and it was like the toughest crowd ever. I remember like at the break for lunch, I was like, my God, I'm doing everything I ever did in theater in Chicago with these guys to open up. Ugh. And they came running to me backstage and like, oh my God, we can't believe how much you're getting them to open up. That's amazing. I'm like, that's opening up? I'm from Illinois, but, I was in California. I'm like, in California, they open up. But, long story short, they really loved it. And, as I would go and work with successive units, they would just go for it. It was like the word of mouth. They heard, oh, this is actually pretty good. And, Oklahoma then shared it with other states. This is 2011, 2012. We roll into 2026. We've done probably 150 workshops. We've probably worked with darn near 60,000 service members and their families. The last time we did Brothers at War, and I'll tell you about Brothers After War in a minute, but the last time we did Brothers at War was with the Navy, the Harry S. Truman, who had a rough deployment in the Middle East. They got shot at by Houthi rebels. They got delayed 2 times, turning their aircraft carrier around. They had a suicide when they got back. They had a lot of suicide ideation, and the captain told us all about this. And they got recommended by another Navy unit that had some suicides and asked us to come work, in July out there in Oklahoma. So, that was the last time we did Brothers at War. So about 500 sailors back from deployment with their families just went through that Brothers at War workshop. And we oftentimes are doing that at Yellow Ribbons for National Guards when they get units coming home. So we still do Brothers at War, that same film, that I shot in 05, 06 in Iraq and Gary saw in 2007. And then that project is what led into the new film. Back to Gary Sinise, I'm sitting in his office and, we're both generous guys, so we're not really sure whose idea was. I definitely kind of had the idea, but was it going to be a feature film? I wanted to follow up. So we got to talking, the two of us. And I told him, look, I'd really like to know how my friends that I made in Iraq are doing, how they're really doing. And I'm spending all this time helping other vets come home. And I'm, sometimes 10 deployment, and now I'm doing 40, but used to be 10 workshops or so in a year, maybe 12. He said, well, let's do a follow-up film. He gave me a few bucks to get started. And so I filmed a little proof of concept. I interviewed my niece, wanted to be interviewed. That was her idea. My brother, Isaac, also a friend, Derek. And it turned out really well. Once again, we went to Hollywood. We said, hey, we'd like to do a TV show. What do you think? We had the guy that brought Shark Tank from Japan to America. So, not an unsuccessful producer with us. He kind of has a good idea. But again, Hollywood was like, this time I actually got sit downs everywhere. So I got to get, I know they heard the pitch. And again, everyone kind of passed. Showtime was interested, but they couldn't get the money behind it. But the Gary Sinise Foundation said, look, General Rand took over that in 2019, and I had a meeting with him. We were going to do like an Indiegogo campaign to raise money, and Gary was down. But of course, he has the Gary Sinise Foundation, so we had to be mindful of that as far as when we were raising money. So I went over there to have a meeting to kind of beg for a couple weeks of his time in February. And General Rand said the film had done a very similar thing for his own wife and him. They'd watched it, and he said that's what Iraq is like. And so he'd experienced that relationship building power of it. And he found out about the workshops and found out about my desire to make a new film. And he turned to all his executives and he goes, could we just fund the film? He's like, would that be programmatic? And they're like, yes, sir, we could. He's like, well, maybe we should just do this, and that, and we were like, yeah, we could do it right. So he's like, come back with a proposal for workshops, come back with a proposal for the films. And I came back and they sponsored 4 workshops, and they eventually got approval from the board and everything to do Brothers After War. And they said, look, we will sponsor Brothers After War on one condition. You need to do and create a seminar for veterans around Brothers After War, like you created around the original film for active duty and National Guard and Reserves and their families. And I said, absolutely. So, I went into the new film knowing that we were going to build a seminar at some point for it. And so did the veterans that I was interviewing. And I honestly think that actually I made the film better, because they knew that the first film had all of a sudden gone out and helped all these other veterans communicate about their experiences. We'd saved lives at this point. We've been told we were the first step to saving some marriages. So when I sat down and interviewed him, if you think back to Brothers After War, there's a moment where Joe goes, I'm telling you this in case it'll help another soldier. And I think that's sort of gave the film extra access, extra emotional courage. I was sort of on a mission. This was my opportunity to really reconnect with and reunite with the friends I'd made in a war zone and ask them questions maybe another filmmaker couldn't. In the film also you see Gunner. What you don't see in the film is I brought Gunner back to the moment when a couple minutes previously I had bullets going across the lens of my camera. He was getting shot at. He was the one caught in the crossfire. That's why everybody went out there to support him. And then he's on one knee caressing the face of a wounded Iraqi soldier. And I said to him, take me back, talk me through that moment. And he goes, yeah, the bullets were flying. Yeah, whatever. And I was like, Gunner, I was there. And for me, it was grace on earth, the way you were touching his face. And then he stopped, he looked down, he started to cry. And he got real and he started to talk for the first time ever about what that experience really felt like for him, and I was able to say, why'd you feel that way? He's like, he was mine. He was my soldier. And I think, why is he willing to do that and be vulnerable? And I think it's that I was there with him. I was literally standing right next to him filming that. So I experienced that moment with him, and the trust that builds up over all these years, and knowing that I'm going to open up to Jake right now for myself, but also because maybe there's another Marine or soldier or airman or sailor that's been bottling something up too, maybe not had an opportunity to talk about it. Maybe this will be a good moment for them too. And a couple months after I left, he reached out to me and thanked me for coming. He said it really helped. So, that's really what the genesis of Brothers After War was. It was wanting to reconnect, wanting to, flash from the war zone 0506, and you see the warfighter in the war zone and flash to the veteran they become. And I wanted to get into all those topics and all that richness. And there's a lot of fun you can have, humor, but also serious, that you can have going back and forth 15 years in time. But the real reason, the underpinning reason, was to do a deep dive into the experience of our veterans and try to learn more about that. Take advantage of we weren't newbies coming into the project. We were sort of veterans in that space and really dug in. But I wanted to go even further. And I think thanks to the generosity of the veterans that I followed up with, we were able to do that.
We're talking with Jake Rademacher. He is the founder and film director with Perseverance Productions. And he's going around the country and holding workshops with the second production he made called Brothers After War. Jake, how do people learn about where you're going to be and when? How do they go on to the whatever, online or whatever, to learn about where you'll be and when you'll be there?
We're about to update our website, which is brothersafterwar.com. You can always get a hold of us at info@brothersafterwar.com. So that's a great place. We're about to update that with our tour schedule for the year. The second thing that we do we're very active on Facebook and on Instagram.
And what are
So
the handles that you use on there?
At Brothers After War.
Okay.
So just Brothers After War for Instagram, Brothers After War for Facebook. It might be Bros After War for Instagram. I think they may narrow the choice a little bit there. But those two things always get an update. And when we come to an area, we kind of I'll always make a very personalized commercial, or I don't know if the commercial is a little strong, but I'll speak directly to the veterans in that space and maybe talk about the last workshop and tell them we're coming. And sometimes there's a little humor, sometimes there's something a little more serious. I try to make it watchable for all, because I know how I am. Like John Andrasik's a great guy. He's Five for Fighting. He did a song for us, and his stuff comes up on my feed. He's touring around, and I've noticed how he does it. And I go, even though I can't go to all these shows, I kind of enjoy him telling me about the next show or the last show and inviting me to it. And so I try to make these little updates in a similar vein, so that if somebody's following our page, they're seeing where we're going, and they're also kind of hearing about where we've been, versus saying the verbatim same thing every time we do a Facebook post.
Is there a way, like going to these workshops, is that the only way to see these movies?
No, Brothers at War and Brothers After War are both available to rent or purchase on Amazon. I know iTunes also has Brothers After War. I think Brothers After War is out there a little more widely because it just got digitally released at the end of May. So I know it's on Amazon. I know it's on iTunes. I think it's on Microsoft. I think that's available almost anywhere you can rent or buy a film. You can get Brothers After War. They have DVDs at Walmart. Brothers at War is a little more select because it's a little bit of an older film, but they do have it available on Amazon, I know.
So folks could sit in their living room and watch, but really to get the full experience, are you at every one of these viewings?
I'm not. I'd love to be. I'm probably at about 20 of them. I mean, we do about 40 a year. I've got 3 other trainers. So one of the things the Gary Sinise Foundation did, the very first workshop they sponsored actually starts Brothers After War. And I'm in front of 1,000 soldiers back from Middle East in Kansas. And they sent Mike Schlitz, who's one of their ambassadors to it. And I don't know what he said to him, but the next day they're like, okay, we're doubling the number of workshops. You got to start training trainers. And the other 3 trainers that we have right now, I got Nathan Grazier, Dr. Nathan Grazier, who's an infantry guy who became a chaplain because he lost his best friend in Afghanistan and he wanted to know what he could do to help the others. He's been doing such a good job that California is going to make him the next state chaplain out here. He's a doctorate in social work. He's one of our trainers. Dr. Noel Apana, who did 20 years, Air Force Academy grad. I'm going to steal his own line. I will say, I'm smart enough to go to the Air Force Academy, dumb enough to embed with the Army in Afghanistan. So he was doing the counter IED missions with the 82nd, the 101st Airborne. Great guy. Experienced a lot of things, the tougher things that veterans experience himself, and proactively searched for solutions. So he got a doctorate in social work himself, and he was awarded Disabled Veteran of the Year last year by the DAV. And I was really pleased and tickled to be there. And then the very next day, he and I did a seminar together for the DAV at their annual convention in California. So great guy. And then Chase Millsap is the other one that does these with us. Chase deployed 4 times, combat Marine, led troops in Iraq as the Marines, got picked up by the Green Berets for a fort deployment. Hollywood filmmaker, writer, great guy. So the 4 of us, we all teach from lived experience. 2 of us have doctorates in social work. And we kind of do it as a team. Usually have 2. I used to do these by myself, but frankly, I highly prefer to do it with another person. And I think you get the benefit. I think it's beyond 2. I think it's more like a triple effect, because one might be talking to you and the other person is quietly listening and thinking, and they may have something to add. I've learned a lot from these guys. I know that becoming a trainer, becoming a facilitator has been great for them to do a deep dive in their own experience and prepare themselves to kind of hold space for people in the seminars. And I can tell you, because we've got Dr. Wasserman's done studies out of Pepperdine, I can tell you statistically speaking that they do just as good a job as I do, because I think we're at 97% now these days that would recommend it to other military families. and they score just as highly as I do when I'm there. So that gave me the comfort. It was hard to take my fingers off the thing I created, but to be quite honest, them coming on board, they had ideas. They had ideas about how to make it better. It created a team. We talk about these things afterwards. We're always like, did we answer that the best way we could have? Is there something else we could have offered? And if your listeners get an opportunity to come to a Brothers After War seminar, I would highly encourage it. You can watch those films at home in your living room, and that is a special way to experience it because it's private. It's just you and your loved one. What you gain at a seminar is a collective experience. You get journals. We give you free journals. We usually buy lunch too. The Gary Sinise Foundation sponsors that, a free journal. And then we facilitate a conversation. And there's some science behind this, but it's actually a good thing to reconnect with other veterans and kind of talk about some of these experiences that are very specific to those who've gone overseas and experienced war and then come home. There's a lot that goes into all of that. And sometimes someone else might open up about something you felt yourself, or you might be moved to open up. I find sometimes people come to our seminars, maybe they have a question, maybe they're a little stuck. We've been doing this for a long time. We've picked up a lot along the way, and so we'll share. If people want, we'd share a little bit of advice with them. And I'll share something with you. I know I told you this, but I feel like I'll tell it with it just happens, very meaningful. At our very last workshop, the 99th that the Gary Sinise Foundation has sponsored, this was in Gary's hometown, where Vietnam veterans, brothers of his wife, inspired him on his journey to help veterans. We had a veteran, a Marine who served in Iraq, who went through our seminar in June in Chicago, drove 90 miles with his wife, 0-degree weather. And he said about 3 hours in the seminar, I came today because I wanted to thank you guys and tell you that going to the seminar in Chicago changed my life. And you could see the energy coming out of him. He was very positive, just a different guy was sitting there than the one that I had actively gone back and forth with in a conversation in the seminar back in June. And so, that's why we're doing this. If we literally are seeing people change their life. I've had one sailor told me that Brothers After War saved his life, the seminar. So I can't guarantee that kind of profound impact for everybody that comes, but I will say that folks that come with their spouse or their father or their daughter, it just opens up a beautiful conversation during the course of the seminar and afterwards. And I think it's very insightful. I think it's a little bit of a catharsis, and I think it's a little bit of a catalyst for growth for the folks that come.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Jake Rademacher, founder and film producer and director with Perseverance Productions, and he's just doing wonderful stuff for veterans, families of veterans, and he himself is a family member of military brothers. Here on Veterans Corner Radio say that our members of the military, family members, and fans of our military are worth their value in gold, and you've certainly exceeded the standard, Jake. So thank you for all you've done and all you're continuing to do, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
You've been listening to Veterans Corner Radio with your host, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Joe Muhlberger. The views expressed on this program are those of Joe and his guests and are opinions based on the best available information. In matters of law or governmental regulation, it will always be best to check with the appropriate agency. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us for the next program on Veterans Corner Radio.
Here's a quick final thought. If you're enjoying these podcasts, why not take a minute to subscribe or mark Veterans Corner Radio as a favorite? It's easy, and you'll be set to be among the first to find out when new podcasts are published. And thanks again for listening to Veterans Corner Radio.